It is 9:47 inches the morning and Sarah is standing on her balcony in Stockholm, Sweden. The temperature reads -5 Celsius. Her breath hangs in the air in small white clouds. She adjusts the wool beanie on her 4-month-old daughter's head, tucks another blanket around the pram, and checks the baby monitor clipped to the side. Then she walks back inside, closes the balcony door, and sits down to drink her coffee. Her daughter is asleep, outside. In the middle of winter, to most Western parents, this image is incomprehensible. It looks like neglect. It looks like a call to Child Protective Services. But in Sweden, in Finland, in Norway, in Denmark, and in Iceland, this is simply Tuesday. This is what every parent does. This is what generations of parents have done. Going back to the 1920s, when tuberculosis was rampant and fresh air was prescribed as medicine. Walk through any Swedish city on a winter afternoon and you will see them. Rows of prams lined up outside coffee shops, babies swaddled in wool, parked on sidewalks, sleeping soundly while their parents sip lattes inside. At daycare centers across Stockholm, every child under the age of 3 naps outside, in rows of prams lined up in the snow, monitored by staff who check them every few minutes. The claim that has gone viral across Instagram and TikTok is this: Swedish babies who nap outside get sick 50% less often than babies who nap indoors, that their immune systems are measurably stronger. That cold exposure activates brown fat, regulates metabolism, and builds lifelong cold resistance. The posts rack up millions of views. The comments are filled with shock, admiration, outrage, and more than a few parents asking for instructions. Here is the problem. Most of those claims are fabricated. Here is what the research actually says, and why it matters far more than the viral posts would have you believe. The most frequently cited study on outdoor napping comes from the University of Oulu in Finland, conducted by researcher Tourula and published in 2008. Tourula surveyed parents across northern Finland about their children's outdoor sleeping habits, and what she found was genuinely striking, just not in the way those Instagram posts describe. Babies who napped outdoors slept significantly longer than babies who napped indoors. While indoor naps typically lasted between 1 and 2 hours, outdoor naps regularly extended from 1.5 to 3 hours. In some cases, parents reported their children sleeping up to double or even triple the duration of their indoor naps. After waking, parents described their babies as more alert, more active, and with noticeably better appetites. According to Tourula's data, the optimal temperature for outdoor napping was -5 degrees Celsius, cold enough to require bundling, but not, and so cold as to be dangerous. Notice what is missing from that description. There is no mention of immune function. There is no 50% reduction in respiratory infections. There is no claim about brown fat activation or lifelong cold resistance. Tourula's study was about sleep duration and sleep quality, and that is what the data actually showed. Longer naps, deeper naps, more alert babies upon waking. But what about those viral claims? The ones attributed to researchers with real names at real universities? In December of 2025, a Swedish-American author and journalist named Linda McGurk, who wrote an entire book on Nordic outdoor culture called "There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather," decided to investigate. She traced every reference cited in a viral Instagram post that had accumulated over 20,000 likes and hundreds of comments. What she found was astonishing. A study supposedly authored by a researcher named Renko at the University of Eastern Finland, which claimed to find a 50% reduction in respiratory infections among outdoor nappers, did not exist. The researcher was real. The university was real. But the study had never been conducted. It had been invented, fabricated, entirely fictional. A report allegedly published by the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, ing outdoor napping to better sleep quality, stronger immunity, and lower irritability in infants, also did not exist. The institute was real, the report was not. A third reference, supposedly from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, concerning a study on cold exposure and emotional regulation. In young children, same story. The institution exists. The research paper does not. Whoever created that viral post, and the hundreds of similar posts from accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers, had taken real researcher names, real university names, and attached them to studies that were never conducted. They had fabricated the evidence. Then they had used the fake citations as a funnel to sell a digital parenting playbook at 50% off. This is not a small detail. This matters, because when arguments are built on invented references, there are real consequences. Parents who believe the exaggerated claims may attempt outdoor napping in unsafe conditions. They may wrap scarves around babies' necks in freezing weather, creating strangulation risks. They may leave babies outside for too long at dangerously low temperatures, believing they are strengthening an immune system rather than risking hypothermia. And even if no child is harmed, the misinformation damages the credibility of a deeply important argument that children need more time outdoors. There are literally hundreds of real studies supporting the benefits of outdoor play and nature exposure for children and adults alike. Making things up only weakens the case for getting kids back outside. So what do we actually know? What does the honest, non-fabricated evidence tell us? Let us start with the mechanism. Even without a controlled study proving reduced illness, there are plausible reasons why outdoor napping might reduce infection risk, and they have nothing to do with cold air magically strengthening the immune system. The most likely explanation is far simpler. Viruses and bacteria thrive indoors. In a daycare room with 30 children, the air is recirculated. Pathogens concentrate. Every cough, every sneeze, every touch of a shared toy becomes a transmission vector. In the outdoor air, even on a cold, still day, those same pathogens are diluted to near insignificance. HEU0069LD. Breathing fresh outdoor air is simply exposed to far fewer respiratory viruses per breath than a HEU0069LD breathing the recycled air of an indoor facility. This is not speculation. This is basic physics. The viral load in a confined space concentrates. In an open environment, it disperses. The cold is not the hero of this story. The ventilation is. There is also the sleep quality angle, and this is where Tourula's actual research becomes relevant. The babies in her study slept longer outdoors, not because the cold was doing something magical to their biology, but for a very mundane reason. In cold weather, babies must be bundled, thick wool layers, a warm sleeping bag, sometimes a pram cover that traps heat while allowing airflow. This bundling restricts movement. It creates a swaddling effect. And swaddling, which has been independently studied and validated across dozens of research papers, is known to improve infant sleep duration, reduce night waking. The cold makes bundling possible without overheating. Overheating, after all, is a known risk factor for sudden infant death syndrome. In a warm indoor room, heavy bundling would be dangerous. At outdoors at -5, it is exactly right. Here is what the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency reported when they reviewed the evidence. In some studies, preschoolers who spent many hours outside, not just for naps, but throughout the day, took fewer sick days than children who spent most of their time indoors. But in other studies, there was no measurable difference. The data is mixed. It does not point to a clear, unambiguous immune benefit. It points to a practice that might help, probably does not hurt, and definitely improves sleep. And for what it is worth, research on forest schools, outdoor preschools where children spend the majority of their day in nature, shows a similar pattern. Some studies find fewer infections among forest school children compared to their indoor peers. Others find no significant difference. One study published in the journal Environment and Behavior in 2018 directly tested the hypothesis that nature, preschools, and conventional preschools differ in illness and injury rates, and found no significant difference in illness incidence between the two groups. This is not the dramatic before and after story that goes viral on social media, but it is the truth. And the truth is more useful. Here is the critical part. Nordic parents do not put their babies outside to nap because they have read a stack of peer-reviewed studies. They do it because their parents did it, and their grandparents did it, and their great-grandparents did it. The practice predates the research by nearly a century. It began in an era when tuberculosis was the leading cause of death in Europe, when fresh air was literally prescribed as medicine, when sanatoriums treated patients with open windows and outdoor rest as a core part of recovery. The practice persisted, not because it was scientifically validated, but because it worked well enough, and because, in a culture that values outdoor time as a fundamental part of a healthy childhood, it simply made sense. There is a Swedish saying that captures this entire philosophy. It is 4 words long. Det finns inget dåligt väder, bara dåliga kläder. There is no bad weather, only bad clothing. This is not a catchy slogan invented for a bumper sticker. It is a cultural operating system. It is how Swedes, Finns, Norwegians, and Danes approach childhood, health, and the outdoors. The weather is not the enemy. Poor preparation is. If you want to try outdoor napping with your own child, here is what the actual Nordic parents and the real researchers recommend. Not the fabricated studies, but the practical wisdom accumulated over generations of doing this safely. First, temperature matters. Tourula's research identified -5 degrees Celsius as optimal, cold enough for bundling without overheating, but not so cold as to require constant monitoring. Many Swedish daycare centers bring prams inside when the temperature drops below -15 degrees Celsius, especially if there is wind that makes it feel colder. Below -20, outdoor napping is generally not practiced, even in the most traditional settings. Second, clothing is everything. Wool directly against the skin, not cotton, because cotton loses its insulating properties when damp. Multiple thin wool layers, a warm hat that covers the ears, mittens, a insulated sleeping bag or foot muff rated for the temperature. 2 U0069 LD should feel warm to the touch, not hot. Check the back of the neck, not the hands or feet, to assess body temperature. Cold hands are normal in cold weather and do not indicate that the shot U0069LD is too cold. Third, the pram itself matters. A traditional Nordic pram, larger, higher off the ground, with a solid shell that blocks wind, is designed for this purpose. The pram should be positioned out of direct wind. A sheepskin liner at the bottom adds insulation from below, where conductive heat loss is greatest. Fourth, supervision is non-negotiable. You use a baby monitor. You check visually every few minutes. If you are at a coffee shop, you sit where you can see the pram. This is not a leave and forget practice. It is a monitored nap in a controlled outdoor environment. And fifth, this is not an all-or-nothing proposition. If you live in a flat without a balcony, if your outdoor space is not safe, if the temperature in your climate regularly drops far below what is manageable, you do not need to replicate this practice exactly to benefit from the underlying principle. The principle is this: fresh air matters. Time outdoors matters. Even a walk in the pram in cool weather, even opening a window during nap time, even spending more time outside during waking hours, these all contribute to the same goal: reduced indoor pathogen exposure, better sleep through appropriate temperature regulation, more time in nature, because that is the real story underneath all the viral misinformation. Nordic children are not healthier because they nap in sub-zero temperatures. They are healthier because they spend an extraordinary amount of time outdoors, hours every day, in all weather, from infancy through adolescence. The outdoor napping is one small piece of a much larger cultural commitment to nature, to movement, and to fresh air. If you cherry-pick the nap without the broader outdoor lifestyle, you are missing the point. Let us return to Sarah on her Stockholm balcony. Her 4-month-old daughter has been asleep for just over 2 hours. The baby monitor on the kitchen counter shows steady breathing. The temperature outside has crept up to -3. Soon the baby will wake, hungry, alert, and ready for the day. Did she need to sleep outside? No. Would she have been fine sleeping indoors in a cot? Of course. Millions of babies around the world sleep indoors and grow up perfectly healthy. But Sarah's daughter slept longer. She slept deeper. She woke up more alert, and Sarah got 2 uninterrupted hours to drink her coffee, answer emails, and breathe, just for a moment, without a baby in her arms. That is not a study published in a peer-reviewed journal. That is not a claim about immune function that can be verified or debunked. That is simply the quiet, practical reality of a tradition that has survived a century because it works well enough, not because science proved it, but because parents tried it and kept doing it and passed it on. I know there are parents watching this who feel a knot in their stomach at the thought of leaving a baby outside in the cold. That reaction is not wrong. It is a deeply ingrained cultural instinct. In most of the world, keeping a baby warm and indoors in winter is what a responsible parent does. The idea of doing the opposite triggers a visceral sense of danger. I am not asking you to ignore that instinct. I am simply inviting you to understand where it comes from and to consider that parents in some of the happiest, healthiest countries on earth, with some of the lowest infant mortality rates in the world, have been doing this for a very long time. They are not neglecting their children. They are doing what their culture has taught them works. The real takeaway is not that you need to put your baby outside in winter. The real takeaway is that time outdoors is not a luxury. It is not something to squeeze in on nice days when the weather cooperates. It is a foundational part of human health, for children and for adults, and the Nordic countries have built their entire parenting philosophy around that truth. If you want to go deeper on how early independence shapes children in the Nordic countries, including why Norwegian parents hand 8-year-olds a chef's knife and teach them to chop vegetables, that video is right here. You might want to sit down for that one. Which part of this surprised you most? That the viral immune claims were fabricated? That the real benefit is about sleep, not sickness? Or that Nordic parents have been doing this for a century without needing a study to prove it works? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one in the first 24 hours.